Please be aware, in this podcast series we talk about all areas of safeguarding, which some people may find upsetting. So please make sure you're okay listening to today's topic. Be mindful of those around you, such as children, that you might not want to listen in. Hi, I'm SSS Safeguarding Director Sam Preston.
And I'm former head teacher and content author Sara.
Today we're discussing some major changes coming to early years safeguarding, and that's at the time of recording in 2025 March. So the Department for Education, the DfE, has announced new early years foundation stage, EYFS, safeguarding reforms set to take effect in September 2025. So these changes aim to strengthen child protection in nurseries, preschools and childminder settings. But as always, there are challenges to consider. So what do you think, Sarah? What do you think to the new announcement?
Well, I think these reforms are a big deal for the early years sector. And whilst they bring some much needed improvements, they also come with some concerns, especially for smaller settings.
So let's start with the basics, because you are my expert in this. Tell me, what are the key safeguarding changes that are coming in 2025?
Well, the reforms cover a wide range of areas, but the key changes include stronger safeguarding recruitment practices. So employers must obtain and verify references before new staff start working with children. Mandatory monitoring of child absences. So early years settings must follow up on unexplained absences and maintain at least 2 emergency contacts per child. So that's important. The next is enhanced safeguarding training. So a new safeguarding training annex will be put in place that will ensure staff have clear and consistent training. Stricter paediatric first aid or PFA rules. So trainees must complete PFA before they're included in staff to child ratios.
Gosh.
I know, there's quite a lot. Safer eating guidelines. So this aims to prevent choking incidents requiring proper food preparation, supervision and staff training. Next is privacy in toileting and nappy changing. And so that's about ensuring dignity while maintaining safeguarding measures. And finally, the key change is stronger whistleblowing policies. So settings must establish clear whistleblowing procedures so that staff feel safe reporting concerns.
Gosh, that's a lot of changes. So what's driving these reforms then?
Well, they come after a public consultation in 2024 where over 1,400 responses highlighted gaps in current safeguarding policies. Right. So serious case reviews have shown that things like poor recruitment practices and lack of absence monitoring can put children at risk. So these reforms aim to strengthen protection and bring early years settings more in line with the broader safeguarding policies that schools and social care currently have.
So these reforms sound really positive on paper, but will they actually help early years providers in practice?
Well, for many high quality providers, these changes will feel just evolutionary rather than revolutionary, because they're already following best practices.
Yeah.
But for settings that have struggled with safeguarding procedures, the new structure gives much needed clarity and accountability. It also sort of helps integrate early years providers into local safeguarding partnerships, the LSPs, alongside schools, police and health services. Now, this is important because early years professionals are often the first line of defence for vulnerable children, yet we've historically seen them being treated as peripheral in the safeguarding players, really. So I do think that's going to be an important move.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I imagine there are also concerns, especially though for smaller providers.
Oh, yeah, definitely. While these reforms, they strengthen safeguarding, they also introduce new challenges, particularly, as you say, for small or single provider nurseries and childminders who don't have large teams to help them with admin and training.
So let's dig into those challenges. What are the early years providers most concerned about, do you think?
Well, I think there's a few major concerns, really. So let's go through them. So recruitment and retention pressures. The new safer recruitment rules requiring reference checks before staff start work are essential, but they could also slow down hiring, worsening an already critical staffing shortages in early years settings, as we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the administrative and financial burden. So tracking absences, updating training records and maintaining emergency contacts sort of adds that extra admin. And this is manageable for large nurseries, but for childminders or small providers, it could be quite overwhelming, actually. Also, the emergency contact requirements. The rule is to have at least 2 emergency contacts per child, and that makes sense, but not every family has that support network. So I think providers will worry about how to enforce this requirement fairly,
Mm.
There's also the impact on small and single provider settings in, as I've said, larger nurseries have a dedicated safeguarding leads, but childminders and small settings don't. They might struggle to meet these new demands without additional funding or resources. And also that multi-agency cooperation challenges. Whilst it's great that early years settings will be included in local safeguarding partnerships, the LSPs, this only works if local authorities, health services and police actively engage with them. There is concern that early years professionals could still be sidelined in decision making.
So that brings us to the big question. Are these reforms realistic? Can early years settings actually implement them without that extra funding or support?
Well, I think that's the challenge. The intention behind the reforms is great, but implementation will depend on sort of clear, practical guidance from the DfE, additional funding, to help smaller providers manage the admin burden, and stronger multi-agency collaboration so early years professionals are treated as equal safeguarding partners. I think without these, there's a risk that larger providers will adapt easily while the smaller settings will struggle to keep up, which could lead to closures. Ultimately, that's the worst case scenario, isn't it?
And that's the last thing we need. There's already a shortage of early years providers.
Exactly. And no one is arguing against stronger safeguarding, but the sector needs realistic support to make it work.
So with this all in mind, let's be positive, what can early years providers do now to prepare for these changes?
Well, that's a really good question. So here are some steps I think that providers can take. So they can review their current policies now, check how their existing safeguarding policies align with the new requirements and get those things in place now. Strengthen the recruitment practices, get ahead by implementing stricter vetting procedures now. Improve their record keeping, set up efficient systems for tracking absences and emergency contacts. I would be encouraging people to engage with safeguarding networks, connect with local safeguarding boards to ensure early years voices are heard, and prepare your staff for the training updates. Identify those gaps in safeguarding knowledge and plan ahead, well ahead of the 2025 September deadline.
Yeah, and I will just jump in and say that SSS Learning, we do have training specifically for this sector, so you can check that out on our website. So being proactive now, then what we're saying is that could help ease the transition later.
Exactly. Providers start preparing now. They won't be scrabbling around when September 2025 rolls around. It's not long. It will come quickly.
It certainly will. So to wrap things up, do you think, I'm just, putting you on the spot, Sarah, as I always do you think these reforms, will they be a positive change for early years safeguarding?
Yeah, I think they will be, but only, and I'm putting this caveat on, only if the government provides proper support for early years professionals. The policy's strong, but its success will depend on implementation. Yeah,
I agree, Sarah. So just a quick reminder before we go, you can find, we've got articles on this subject. They're all freely available on our website. You can also find our back catalogue of all articles there and all our previous Safeguarding Conversation podcasts. They're on there as well, and they're also accessible on our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.